Welcome to the Taylor Made Tasty podcast. I'm Taylor, retired serial quitter turned goal boss coach, speaker, and consultant. I believe a beautiful life starts with a beautiful mindset. Join me as we amplify confidence, resilience, and actionable tools on the road to quit quitting on you and your vision. You are worthy of your goals, so let's go get there. Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Taylor Made Tasty, the podcast. Today we are talking about how to use sleep to boost your consistency, productivity, and focus. I have been looking high and low for someone to have this conversation with me because a huge arm of wellness is based on how we sleep, how effective we sleep, how we wake up. That can really add or subtract to our overall wellness and goals. So stay tuned as our guest, Tenessa Shears, and I discuss highly actionable strategies to boost your dream sleep for more emotional control, how to make changes in your bedroom to get better sleep, and the scientific way to wind down before bed that creates better sleep. Tenessa Shears is a health consultant, kinesiologist, certified sleep consultant, and host of the Becoming Limitless podcast. Today, she helps you optimize your health, focus, and productivity with science and biohacking. Her passion is working closely with clients to implement effective sleep, nutrition, movement, and out-of-the-box stress management strategies to eliminate brain fog and wake up feeling well-rested, energized, and focused. She does this by optimizing the performance capacity of your brain and body so you can produce more meaningful, impactful output and scale to your goals faster. I just know you're going to love this high energy conversation with Tenessa and I to get better sleep tonight. Hi, Tenessa. Thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this conversation all week.
Yes, me too. I am beyond excited for this conversation today because I feel like personally I do a lot of things that should get me really good sleep and well rested and still find myself sometimes, struggling. And I also know that great sleep has a direct correlation to having the energy and focus to accomplish your goals day in and day out. So this conversation is going to be extremely beneficial to listeners. I know that because many of our listeners, I call my clients like team quitting to build a goal-filled life where quitting on yourself isn't an option anymore. And so before we get into how good sleep can boost your productivity, can you give us some insight on how lack of sleep makes quitting an easier option?
Oh, absolutely. So, literally think about the last time you woke up and you felt groggy throughout the day. I find that we are we lean into a lot of decisions that are all about short-term comfort, instant gratification, things that make us feel better now over what we want long-term. And sleep is fundamental to setting up our brain to making good decisions. And I know we can get into a lot of this stuff, but there's even a process that happens while our brain dreams that allows us to respond to emotional stimuli a lot better. We've all been irritated when we're not sleeping, but a lot of that is helped when we have better sleep. So everything from emotional and mood management to decision making to even if you want to get really sciencey, good sleep affects your blood sugar the next day. And we all know that when our blood sugar is not stable, that's when you get cravings, you get hungry, you make maybe food choices you didn't want, you skip your workouts, you're more likely to, make those short-term food decisions. So many things are fundamental to sleep. And sleep really helps us, I find, make better decisions the next day. And like you said, stay on task with your goals instead of quitting on yourself all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Which brings me to the question, which might sound simple, but I have a feeling the answer isn't simple, is what is good sleep? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What is a definition of good sleep, for an example?
Yeah, I always ask this. How do you feel when you wake up in the morning? If you wake up feeling well rested, you can get out of bed, you can start your day without coffee. Nothing wrong with coffee. I drink coffee, but it's the difference between like enjoying a cup of coffee and needing it to get the day going. How are you feeling when you're getting out of bed? If you had a high quality sleep that was of enough duration, you likely won't need an alarm clock to wake up. Your body will naturally wrap up its sleep cycles if you've gotten enough sleep. You'll have a clear brain when you wake up. You won't feel like your eyelids are made of cement or you're feeling foggy, and you're ready to jump into your day. Like, that's how we want to feel when we wake up. But like, it's so fascinating as a society. Like, so many of us are chronically tired, or our quality of sleep is not there, and everyone is going through their day tired, and we just look around at each other. We're like, this is normal, right? But my call is always like, question, do you want that to be normal for you? Because when our brains are well slept, they're meant to be clear and focused and sharp, and we're meant to be able to be more productive and make better decisions with our day and just feel a heck of a lot better than what most of us are feeling.
Yeah, definitely. So there's this term, the REM sleep, right? Dream sleep, that I feel like goes around, but people don't really know what it means. Can you maybe expand on that a little bit too?
Yeah, so when we are sleeping, and I'm going to keep this pretty simplified, there's basically 3 different stages your brain is in at one point or the other. Light sleep, which is just kind of, it has its purpose, but it's more like the surface sleeping, you're easier woken up. Deep sleep, which is rejuvenating. It helps our brains be refreshed for the next day. There's lots of hormones that are produced that help with recovery from workouts and help our brain feel really good. This is a great way to really foster waking up feeling energized. And then, like you said, REM sleep, that's the third component. So REM stands for rapid eye movement, and it's when we spend our time dreaming. I really like REM sleep specifically. I mean, I love all of them, but REM sleep has some really cool benefits, and like one of them being that it allows you to problem solve and think outside of the box a lot better than if you were to not get enough REM sleep, right? And like being able to solve problems is great, whether you're trying to, come up with a different strategy to hit your goal, or you're trying to be creative in some way. This is a really good way to foster that, is to get enough dream sleep. But beyond that, there was a super interesting study that was done where they had 2 different groups, and one group didn't get enough dream sleep. They were actually deprived of it on purpose. And the group that did get enough dream sleep, and they were shown images that got increasingly more negative. And the group that didn't get enough dream sleep had much more exaggerated negative and positive reactions. So they were less able to keep their cool and control their emotions compared to the people that got enough dream sleep. So that's why we feel so irritated on those days we wake up, and why we're more likely to go like, to heck with it. I'm just gonna, I'm gonna watch Netflix instead of work, or I'm going to grab pizza instead of this that I planned over here, or whatever it might be. And if we can stay grounded in making firm decisions, not based in short-term gratification, we're going to be sticking with our goals and our long-term outcomes so much easier.
Yes, absolutely. So with that, if we're looking for more REM sleep, dream sleep, what are some actionable tools around us boosting that? Because I call my group, like, I want you to be solution oriented badasses. Like, I need, problem, solution. Like, we should always be looking for solutions. And because the problems are just going to come, right? That's just natural, and it's happening, and the world's going to serve it to you on a silver platter. So if we're saying that we can actually boost that problem solving ability with REM sleep, dream sleep, then what are some tools around that we can, amplify that sort of sleep cycle?
Yeah, so one of the things that we would need to know about REM sleep is where the majority of it happens. So when we go to sleep at night, so let's say the earlier hours, whether that be 9, 10, 10:30, 11, most of our deep sleep happens on that end of the night. But in contrast, most of our dream sleep, that REM sleep, happens on the other end of the night. So the earlier morning hours, so 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So what we want to do is ensure that there is nothing going on that is going to disrupt those early morning hours of sleep. So there are 3 big ones that jump off the back when I'm looking at protecting REM sleep. I am looking at the environment we are sleeping in to start. So one thing I look at is there any light coming into your room that is going to wake you up during the night? This can be anything from the flashing notification light on your phone to the sun rising and having like ineffective window treatments. Like if you can see the sun coming up or you can tell it's morning before you open your curtains, it's probably too bright in your room and to look into some blackout blinds and stuff like that. But a lot of us have like alarm clock faces that are lit up, all kinds of technology in our room that is creating a light. And I like to give my clients something called the hand test. So right before they go to sleep and right when they wake up, if you hold your hand 6 inches in front of your face, can you see it? Because if you can, there's too much ambient light in the room, and that what light does, the problem with it is it suppresses a hormone called melatonin that helps us sleep well. And so when we have not enough melatonin in our bodies, we're more likely to wake up. And we are most easily woken during those early morning hours, and that's when REM sleep is happening. So we want to really protect that time, especially by, how light affects us. The second way is looking at our light exposure before bed. So what I'm specifically talking about is the time we spend staring into our TVs and our computers and our phones. And this goes far beyond, just time spent on Netflix or anything like that. But when you look at how it affects the brain, the brightness of the light that comes from these devices can delay that hormone melatonin production by up to 3 hours, which can really affect your sleep. And they did a really interesting study where they looked at a group that read on a book before bed, like a paper book, and then a group that read on an iPad. And the group that read on the iPad had disrupted REM sleep and disrupted hormone production. And on top of that, it carried over for 3 nights post reading on the iPad. It's called a digital hangover effect, which is brutal when we think that if we're even doing this 3 to 4 nights a week, we're affecting our REM sleep. So we've talked about the light, ambient light in our room affecting our sleep. We've talked about the idea of the screens before bed. The other thing we want to consider is that good old glass of wine that we use to wind down at the end of the night, because alcohol is a fascinating thing when you watch what it actually does to the brain. It sedates the frontal lobe of the brain. So we're not actually engaging in proper sleep, but we're more sedated. And what happens is when that sedation wears off around 1 or 2 a.m., our body has a very hard time sleeping. So you'll often find not only are you up going to the washroom to go pee, but your body is now dehydrated and not able to engage in sleep because of the sedation effect of the earlier night. So actually, it's fascinating if you've ever tracked your body stats with a Fitbit or an Oura Ring or anything like that, and you have a glass of wine before bed, you will see higher resting heart rate at night, and you will see a crash in the amount of REM sleep. It is the most obvious correlation. So fascinating to see. But those are the big 3 things that affect REM sleep.
Well, you just probably changing the game for a few people here with that last one for sure. That is fascinating though, because you do think, and I feel like we've actually been told that too. It's like, oh, glass of wine before bed or something like that. Now, on the flip side, warm things like, a red wine or whatever, but different than that, like tea, decaf tea. Do you see any benefit of that helping with sleep?
Yeah, so one of the things that I like to use tea for, and specifically I'm talking about either chamomile or decaf green tea, they both have different things in them. Like, for example, decaf green tea has something cool in it called L-theanine, which lowers your heart rate, lowers your blood pressure, lowers anxiety, and lowers stress. I mean, all of these things are great for helping you stay asleep, especially if you wake up during the night. I love using these as tools to assist with a wind down. My only caveat about that is if it's causing you to wake up to use the washroom in the middle of the night, just make sure you pull it back a little further from bedtime if that ends up being a problem for you.
Yes, good. Good point. So now, as far as the emotional side of us with our consistency and our productivity and our focus, how are those more in control, towards our goals, our consistency, our productivity? How are those more in control when we get good sleep?
Yeah, so there is a really interesting concept called it's hold on, sorry, I just had a brain fart. There's this really interesting concept specifically called disconnection syndrome. That's where I was going with that. I'm 34 weeks pregnant right now, so I'm dealing with the end stage baby brain at the moment. I put a book in the fridge the other day. Don't ask me. It's called disconnection syndrome anyways. And essentially what is happening in there is you have parts of the brain, which you guys might be familiar with. There's the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for our planning, decision-making, executive function. It's what makes us humans and what makes us able to, follow through on things and make good decisions. We also have this other area of the brain called the amygdala, which is all about our emotions and those emotional responses that we have to things that make us feel like, what's the point? I deserve this. This is not that big of a deal. I don't need to do this right now. It doesn't even matter. We want those two things to be connected, meaning when they are connected, our decisions are more often made from that part of the brain where we are thinking about long-term future. However, when we are not experiencing enough sleep, it takes the prefrontal cortex offline and delegates a lot of our decision makings to the amygdala. And that is the emotional center of the brain. And I don't want my decisions being delegated to the emotional part of my brain, because if you ask me when I feel like waking up in the morning and working out, 9 times out of 10, it's usually, no, that sounds terrible right now. But what I want to do is I want to always be making decisions where my prefrontal cortex is thinking like, yeah, I get that, but you don't feel like it on a lot of mornings. And that doesn't have to mean we don't work out. It means we get started. It means we take that step towards what we said we wanted yesterday when we weren't feeling so emotional. So sleep really helps kind of stave off that disconnection syndrome, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely. You explained that with such ease, and it made so much sense. I love that. So sort of speaking of that productivity and more control in our life, right? Depending on our home situations, you mentioned the light before bed and the light in our room, but are there any other sort of changes or upgrades that we can make to our bedroom for better sleep aside from those things?
Yeah, if we're talking about our bedroom specifically, there's a couple things we can do. We can look at what I call the soundscape of our bedroom. So some of us have kids, some of us have snoring partners, some of us have loud dogs or cats that like to play floor hockey with anything in the middle of the night. That's my cat. So I often find that when we are sleeping, if there are sounds in our house, or honestly, if our neighbors are loud, or, the guy that lives next door has got a really loud motorcycle, like that he likes to start up at 4 a.m, if we have those things that are waking us up, we mentioned earlier, we are way more easily woken up in the early morning hours. So I really like to protect it with what I call a neutral soundscape. So there's a couple things that I'll put into play. I really like to experiment with the idea of white noise. And that can come from a couple different areas. Like some people really like to use a fan. Some people like to use a sound machine. Some people like to use an app on their phone. But creating a stable sound environment so that when those sudden noises happen, they don't break silence and cause you to be jarred out of sleep. They are much less likely to interfere. So that is one thing that I really like to implement. On the other hand, if you're a really sensitive sleeper like I am, I always wear earplugs to bed. And this really helps block out my husband's snoring, who is a lot closer to me than the neighbors outside. So, and I mean, everyone's sleep sensitivity will be different, and you'll really have to experiment with this. But I find even having a baby, I'm able to hear my daughter cry with my earplugs in and my sound machine and my husband snoring beside me. So if you are a light sleeper like that, this is definitely an area you'd want to pay attention to. So that's one part. But the other thing you can do to your room actually is look at the temperature of your room. And it's something we don't even think about, because I know a lot of us love to get cozy before bed. You put on the jammies, maybe you have the shower, especially in the winter, bundle up in blankets. But when we sleep in warmer environments, it doesn't allow melatonin to be produced. And melatonin is that sleep hormone. So you can actually block your body from doing that necessary temperature drop that needs to happen in order to foster good sleep. So one of the things I'll always suggest is an hour or two before bed, or if you can auto program your thermostat or your AC, it depends where you live if you need an AC, but you want it to sit around 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's around 18 degrees Celsius. This is generally optimal sleeping temperature, but most of us are sleeping a little warmer than that. So that's one good way to do it. And then the other way I really like to think is allow yourself to feel a little cool before bed. And this is something that does take a bit of practice because it's so counter to like getting under the blankets and reading a book. But allowing yourself to like, maybe it's take your socks off, maybe it's keep the blankets down until you're falling asleep. Like, I don't like to feel cold, but cool. And you'll start to notice a difference on those nights where you're no longer overheating, because that is something that can wake you up and again disrupt the quality of sleep you have during the night.
Yeah, absolutely. I never would have thought about that for sure. So life is busy, life is crazy. We're being pulled in many directions throughout the day. And you've mentioned that good sleep will help us navigate that, right? So when it comes to actually powering down, since we know that we got to take alcohol out of the equation now, and it's easier said than done to power down at night since we're high functioning on all these different levels throughout the day, are there other scientific ways that we can wind down before going to bed to create that better sleep?
Yeah, I always like to think about what is actually going on in terms of brain activity. So think about the usual night. We're watching Netflix, scrolling Instagram, maybe we're on Pinterest right up until we go to sleep. Even if you finally, put kids to bed and you have all this input coming in. You have the blue light from your screens, which is keeping your brain awake. You have all the information coming in, the dopamine, like all the reward signals from seeing all the different Instagram posts, or you're watching TV and then, you're having to make decisions and think about what you're seeing. And your brain is in a brainwave state called beta. It's focused, it's alert, it's attentive. This is okay during the day. Like when we want to get stuff done, we want to be in beta. Like we don't want to feel sleepy when we're at work. But we often stay in beta, and then all of a sudden we turn out our lights and try to go to sleep. And we stare at the ceiling, we toss and turn, and we wonder why we don't have solid sleep. And if we do fall asleep because we're so exhausted, we're waking up in the middle of the night and our brains are like, well, here's your to-do list for tomorrow. Like, let's think about it over and over again. Let's not get back to sleep. That usually is a signal that your cortisol or your stress hormone is way too high in your body. And I often find that we don't leave any separation between being in beta and being asleep. So I often like to kind of create what I call a runway into sleep. And when you're starting doing this, just plan for 30 minutes, keep it doable, but gradually increasing this up to 60 minutes, even 90 minutes is going to foster such good sleep. So what comes next is understanding that if we've spent the whole day, most of us don't even take a break, in beta, focusing, doing, planning, scheduling, all of that, we want to next spend some time in the brainwave state called alpha, which is a little bit slower. And how you know you're in alpha is you're achieving that feeling of relaxation, restoration, peace, refreshed. And the way I look at it is, am I still receiving input from the outside world? Other people's thoughts, opinions, what they're saying, other people's brains. Are their inputs still coming into mine? And I find, like, how often do we do that during a day where we're not listening to a podcast while washing the dishes, while we're not, working, while we're not having a conversation? So creating time, starting with, 15, 20 minutes, where our brain is using its own thoughts and its own feelings to fill our brains. And so things I like to do during this are things like, take my makeup off, I'll get my pajamas on, I will, read a really light book. And nothing that is like a business book or a nutrition book or something that is going to get me thinking about what I have to do or how to implement what I'm learning. I'm thinking just something light and fun. And I'm thinking about bringing the attention from the outside world inward. So you go into this alpha state and this starts to slow your brain down. You're starting to feel the calm. It's kind of like that gentle energy slide. And then right before we go to sleep, I always like to spend a little bit of time, either just 2 minutes, 5 minutes, breathing, meditating. And it doesn't need to be formal. You don't need to be educated in how to do it. Just like, how can I bring the focus now completely inward? How can I just spend some time breathing and slowing my thinking down? That's a big one, is how can I slow my thinking down before we get into the slowest brain waves, which are delta, which is our deep sleep. So instead of thinking like, go, 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 sleep, which is what most of us do, think of it like being on a really nice like slide where you're slowing down your brain activity, drawing the attention inward, spending more time just focusing on being instead of doing. And having that gradual feeling, like, you know, when you read a good book and you fall asleep reading, creating that experience going into sleep will set you up for such a better sleep than like crashing into sleep.
Yes, definitely. Now what about, okay, so we have sound machines or fans. What about actual like meditations or things with words and music and noise? Are those beneficial at all, or is that good, bad? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, you know what? This one, I'll definitely answer the question, but it's also entirely individual. Like, for me personally, I don't need the meditation to have good sleep. That doesn't mean it doesn't have a purpose, because I definitely have clients that I work with that their brains are on fire all day, or maybe just due to the nature of how their family life is, they have to work right before bed. So what I find meditation or breathing or just reflection has a really good purpose for is accelerating that wind down process. Meaning, like, the more time we spend in that will slow our brains down. So I find like there is like Wednesday nights, for example, I see clients until 8:30 at night. And I'm a really early sleeper. I'm usually asleep by 9, so it really affects my sleep that night. So what I find is that on those nights, I call it like the big guns. Like, I need to pull out the big guns and slow down my brain a little bit faster. So I need to be thinking like, okay, how can I really disengage and spend more time in that? So if you're someone who has trouble falling asleep or wakes up in the middle of the night and your brain is going all the time, using these tools will help you wind down faster. And I mean, there's no perfect or right way to do it. Like, there's apps that'll help you with that. You can do it on your own. You can just sit there and breathe in through your nose and out through your nose for 2 seconds each way. And I think it's finding what really works best for you, but just knowing that it's not something you have to do to have a good sleep, because I've been able to master it that way, but I still use it when needed, if that makes sense.
So not relying on one thing, but you're kind of talking about so many options, which I love. But if you were to recommend like one simple action that listeners can implement towards getting good sleep tonight, what would that be?
Honestly, if we're looking at how the science of how sleep works, I think it would be being smart with your evening light. And if you think back to like the days before we had all these indoor lights that lit up our house until the moment we went to sleep, and all we relied on was candle and skylight, naturally, if you think about what happens in the sky at the end of the day, it goes yellow and then it goes red or orange and then pink and then red and then it gets dark, and that would normally cue our brains it's time to go to sleep. But we live in this environment now which is artificially lit, and that's telling your brain it is day all the way up until you go to sleep. So one of the simplest changes you could make, and it really doesn't even require much beyond just remembering to do it, but think about this, like, how could I change my lights in the hour or two before bed to mimic sunset? And what that usually looks like is like, if my lights are on a dimmer, can I dim them? Can I turn on a table lamp instead of an overhead lamp that has a soft yellow bulb instead of the bright white ones that are overhead? Can I put a salt lamp in my bathroom instead of the bright overhead vanity lights that are keeping my brain awake? You know what I mean? Just think about softening the light in the hour or two before bed. It'll really make a difference on not only that sleep hormone melatonin production, but on your energy going into sleep. Meaning, like, the bright light stimulates beta brainwaves focus and alertness, while that yellow tinted light that's also a little lower, like a table lamp, will tell our brains, okay, calm down, night's coming, we're getting ready for sleep. So it's a simple little hack that'll work really well.
Yes, okay, that's a good one. Easy to implement tonight. May need to stop at the Home Depot or Lowe's or something, get some soft bulbs, but I like it. This has been so good. Oh my gosh, I have learned so much. I would love for you to share about your business and how listeners can connect with you and learn more about good sleep.
Yeah, well, basically, I'm a health consultant, and my job is to help you wake up more well-rested and have stable energy through all the day and not deal with brain fog all the time. So you're thinking clearly so that we can be more productive. Not for the sake of adding more to the to-do list, but literally just so we can free up our time for things we want to do, like our health or, more time for our family. So that's my role specifically. But if you're like, this is interesting, how can I find out more about this? I have a podcast called Becoming Limitless, and every single episode is a dive into one of the strategies we've talked about. And there's so many of them, but like if you were like, tell me more about the light, tell me more about the wind down routine, tell me more about the bedroom biohacking. It'll give you like very simple, actionable strategies to implement. And what I always suggest, implement one thing, give it a week or two. Does this help or not? And then go on to the next one, so we don't feel like you're like a fire hose of things to start trying. But just really think of it as something that like, this is an experiment I'm going on for the next year to see how I can improve my clarity and my energy. What can I do this week to make a difference? So Becoming Limitless podcast will definitely give you a direction on how to start with that.
Beautiful. And on social media at all?
Oh, I'm on Instagram. I'm at Tenessa Shears. I'm always posting all the fun, like the biohacks and the things that, really help you wake up more well-rested. So Tenessa Shears is where you'll find me there.
Yes, so everyone go follow. Thank you so much, Tenessa. This has been truly impactful, and I am excited for everyone to get better sleep tonight and get more consistency, productivity, and focus towards their goals. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, y'all, it is time for the quote of the episode. This quote is from American author Ernest Hemingway. The quote is, "I love sleep. My life has the tendency to fall apart when I'm awake, End quote. Ernest Hemingway. Take that into your week, your month, maybe even your year, and implement some of these many strategies to get better sleep tonight. As always, thank you for being here. Thank you for being in my community. I'm so glad you showed up today, and let's go get there. Look at you, crushing it. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Tailor Made Tasty podcast. My hope is you always leave with a takeaway to implement in your own goal-crushing journey. I would love if you could take a moment to leave a review. And if you're looking for a community of goal boss badasses just like you, be sure to check out tailormadetasty.com/membership.